Ooh, sinister intro. How's it, my friends? Welcome to my Tamiya 148 Heinkel 219 Uhu Eagle Owl build. Firstly, I want to thank everyone that subscribed, commented, and watched the videos. I really appreciate it. So, after hundreds of emails and messages about my next build, by that I mean absolutely zero messages and emails, I decided that my next build will be the Tamiya 148 Heinkel He-219 Uhu, a kit I've been looking forward to building for over 20 years. This is a Tamiya kit, so as most of us know, that means it's nearly a shake and bake kit. And thank God for that, because I have limited time on this planet and I don't want to struggle with crappy engineered kits. I also have to apologize early on already. I know. Unfortunately, the footage for the cockpit build went a bit wanky, and I'm still learning all the ins and outs of this Sony camera, so please forgive me. Either way, the cockpit went together without any issues, and also has most of the Eduard photo-etch in there, which wasn't so great because it was the self-adhesive version, and I'm so glad Eduard stopped using that. Tamiya has a lovely bit of engineering as seen in the start of the video. The cockpit tub or floor has been cast in metal to keep the kit from being a tail sitter. Freaking genius. And that is a 23-year-old kit. Makes some of the more modern companies look like a right bunch of wankers. So let's get on with this build. As seen earlier, the kit has some great surface detail with fine panel lines and other surface details, typical Tamiya. It, however, does not have rivet detail. You'll have to add that yourself. But on the other hand, I'm not sure one should rivet a sleek looking killing machine like this. I prefer to not do it, and also think after the complex Wellenmuster camouflage has been applied, especially with the black undersides, you won't be able to see most of the rivets in any way. So yeah, I'm not gonna rivet this guy. So far, the usual cleanups and parts removal has occurred. I use my trusty Swan Morton surgical blades and handles for this task. Beats any hobby knife. Blades down. Sharp, sharp, as my fellow South Africans would say. Nearly all the part fits is perfect on this kit. There are some small issues here and there that I will highlight, but these landing gear internal parts fit perfectly. The only problem here is that Tamiya got a bit lazy and did not include a bulkhead for the landing gear bays, so you can see straight in there. Yeah, Tamiya. But the Eduard photo-etch set remedies that little problem with a lovely set of brass bulkheads. The clear parts in this kit are beautiful with just a slight amount of distortion here and there. We're using my trusty guard hand, aka model snob nippers. I don't have to worry about grazing the clear parts at all. To add all the Eduard photo-etch, the surface details need to be removed, and I am using my trusty Proxen rotary tool for this task. With a round fine cutting tool. This makes light work of a delicate job. However, because the head is round, I can't get into all the nooks and crannies, so the scalpel blade helps with removing the leftovers. I am aware that some of the detail needs to remain, especially around the throttle clusters. I check and then I check again and then I check again to make sure what needs to stay and what needs to go. I like that saying that goes, measure twice, cut once. It makes me look like I know what I'm doing. So a little bit about cutting photo etch. I always use a new blade to avoid frustration. I also use some hard but pliable surface to cut on. purely to not blunt the blade sooner than it needs to be. Cutting on glass is not a good idea if you love your blades. This is a small cutting tool from the small shop that you can get on Fleabay. Wax pencils are great for placing small parts. It has just enough surface tension to keep most photo etch parts stuck to it, but not enough to keep it stuck when there's something with more surface tension, aka the plastic part you're trying to stick it to around. Here, unfortunately, the Eduard self-adhesive nonsense is not cooperating. Also, getting older is not for sissies. Using some super glue helped the rest of the Eduard photo etch to stick where it was supposed to go. I use a sewing needle in a vise, and I clean it using a soldering torch when there's too much gunk stuck to it. Works for me. Following are a couple of pics of the completed cockpit. Be aware that the Tamiya instructions are not correct when it comes to the location of the seat belts. The seat belts go through the seats or underneath the headrest instead of going over the headrest. The seats are also missing some cushions or upholstery. I initially made that with some plastic card, but that didn't look realistic enough, so I replaced that with some cushions made out of putty. The fuselage fit is not perfect, but the issues that are present are minor. I like to spend a lot of time when it comes to closing up the fuselage. I absolutely despise sanding and filling, and therefore I close up the fuselage in stages. I dry fit a lot to see where the issues are and to get a better idea of how I'm going to glue the fuselage together. In short, I do a lot of planning and take mental notes on where things might get challenging. I use Tamiya tape not only for masking, but to also hold parts together, and it does an excellent job. Once the parts have been secured as best as they will fit, thin cement goes into the seam. My bottle of Mr. Cement is getting a bit low, so I decant some into a small tattoo ink cup to get better control over the amount of cement that is applied. And oh, by the way, the Tamiya extra thin and thin cement applicator, tada, extends to resolve this issue. If you don't believe me, go check it out. The slight problems are on the fuselage mostly, around the Schrager Musik area. As far as I could determine, you're going to end up with a tiny step, doesn't matter what you do. So some light sanding will be at the order of the day. There is also a tiny step where the elevators and the fuselage meet that can be remedied with some light sanding once again. One thing I can recommend is to not glue the rudders on as early as I did. They really do get in the way. Let's flip this baby over. Some people like these building jigs and some don't. I kind of like them. They are not perfect, but I have found them to be quite handy. Takes a little bit of practice to get them to work the way you want, but they are definitely not for quick builds or quick corrections or anything like that. They're designed for long-term staging of whatever part of the model you're working on. Once all of the fuselage has been glued together, I clamp it together with a mini clamp and leave it to dry for 24 hours. Sanding, and more sanding. The bane of my existence. Yeah, I'm using the Infinity range of sanders. They work really well. And no, local health and beauty store emery boards are not the same thing and do not work as well. Ask me how I know. The heating exhaust I added with some plastic card was standing a little too proud, and that needed to be sanded down a bit. Here are those lovely Eduard brass parts for the missing landing gear bulkheads that I mentioned earlier on. Once again, removing the little nibs with a new scalpel blade makes it for an easy job. To keep the parts in a temporary position, I glue them in with some Tamiya extra thin. I will secure them with some super glue later on. The fit of these bulkheads are perfect and I had no problems with them at all. On to the landing gear. The nose wheel has one part that is replaced with some photo-etch. I also decided that I was going to pose the nose wheel turned, as I saw this in several of the reference pictures. That means that the wheel bracket needs to be cut from the strut and then glued back at the required angle. And yes, it was a butt-clenching moment. The old eyesight is definitely not 20/20 anymore, so in comes the magnifying lamp once again. The main landing gear fits together really well, with only some minor cleanup required. I also decided to add brake lines. I used some 0.2mm lead wire for this. The Eduard photo-etch set has some lines in there, but I do not like them because of the flat look. These brake lines were round pipes after all. Major malfunction time once again. You guys thought that we were done with that. Sit back and relax and watch how I destroy an exhaust. Best of all, it was fine after the first drill, but I had to go and push the limits. And here is the second attempt. Sometimes hand tools are just better. Although the Eduard photo-etch that goes onto the exhaust does not require the pipes to be drilled out, I decided to do that because it really looks silly with the exhaust grills just stuck on there. Luckily, I could use the other Uhu kit's exhaust pipes because I plan on using the Verlinden resin set on my other Uhu kit when I build it one day. Maybe in 20 years time. And with the pesky grills fitted, the next step will be to paint and weather them with a rusty effect, which we will look at in the next episode. The aerodynamic flap damper thingies went on without much trouble. Always a good idea to confirm where things are supposed to go after the fact. I like to use cheap sponge from AutoZone to mask especially deep wheel wells like these. Cut to shape, they make excellent mask. And we can also do some surgery on SpongeBob SquarePants and the rest of his family. This is a not so nice seam that sits on the rear end of the engine nacelles. The real aircraft has a panel line there, but the Tamiya ones are not in the correct location. I started off with 400 grit in finish sanding sticks and worked my way to 800 grit. These infini sanding sticks are a treat to use. Once they get filled with dust, they can be cleaned by running them over some cloth or rags or by using a toothbrush, and they are as good as new again. They also seem to come alive once you introduce some H2O to the equation. Great stuff, in short. If you can find them, they are a great investment. A lot of the gunpla Gundam stores carry them here in the USA. And no, once again, I am not sponsored by anyone. Next are a couple of enhancements I did that got lost in the footage, but that I took some pics of. Heating exhaust on the top of the wings, Fug aerial photo-etch, Revi gun sight, note the broken off visor support lost forever to the damn carpet monster. Previously mentioned heating exhaust, pre-sanding. Tamiya have all the trim actuators wrong on the rudder and elevator, so I fixed that. They also didn't do anything but holes for the wing mounted cannons. I used some aluminium rod and some plastic card to make my own. And let's move on to some painting. The first thing I did was clean the whole fuselage with some 90% alcohol. I see a lot of questions on Facebook, especially about paint mixes and airbrushing and air pressure and needle sizes, etc, etc. I've included what I do in the next couple of minutes. These methods always work great for me, and the biggest tip I can carry forward that I learned from my airbrushing mentor is, if that paint is not wet when it hits the plastic, you are doing something wrong. The one other thing to check is to spray thin coats of paint instead of trying to blast everything on there in one go. Thin coats and build them up slowly. At the end of the day, you can have the best airbrush setup in the world, but if you do not stick to the basics, well, you'll learn. So guys and girls, we're coming to the end of part 1. I want to thank you for watching, and especially if you've made it this far. If you have not subscribed, please consider doing so. I hope you enjoyed this one and learned something, and I will see you soon for part 2. Auf Wiedersehen.